Um, Hello, welcome to Circle One. I'm your host and the founder and CEO of Oxesis. My name is John Swiston, and we've got some great guests with us here today. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves very quickly? Awesome. And Chris, I think I think Chris is frozen. Well, that's okay. It's our first ever episode of Circle One on Twitch, so there's bound to be some technical difficulties. We've got 3 viewers in the chat, so we're just gonna hang out here for a minute and relax. Well, maybe we get some viewers in the chat saying hi. But Chris, can you introduce yourself briefly at the top of the show? Yeah, we lost you just for a brief second.
Alrighty. Anyways, hello, I'm Chris, friend of John's, creative strategist, and yeah, happy to discuss some things on the new live stream platform today.
Awesome. And what I'm going to do is very quickly fix your titles, because there we go. There's Brandon. Things got mixed up when Chris left the chat. So, oops. Uh-oh. Let's get Chris a title up. Hello to everybody joining us in the chat. We are very excited to be on our first ever Twitch live stream. We've done about 10 episodes on YouTube. And our 10th episode, we actually had some live streamers, some more serious live streamers on the episode to talk about live streaming and maybe what professional live streaming looks like. And the resounding advice from that group of folks was get on Twitch. So here we are, our first ever Twitch episode, and we're so glad to be here. And hopefully the topic of today's show is somewhat fitting. We're going to talk about new media with two very interesting folks. But as is traditional, I'm going to give a bit of an introduction to the show off the top. And hopefully maybe we're saying hi to some viewers. Hi to the viewers in the chat. We're very excited to have you joining us here. But to kind of kick things off, my name is John. A little bit less than 2 years ago, I founded a systems integration firm called Oxesis. We do technology systems for small business clients, but we also help with creative systems and operational systems. I'm getting just a little bit of language from our production assistant. The audio from Chris and Brandon is a little quiet. Can I just get some audio from you, Chris and Brandon, before I continue?
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yes. All right. I'm just going to jack
Sorry,
up.
I had myself on mute while I wasn't talking.
That's okay. We're going to get your audio levels tuned up here. Brandon, can I get a bit of audio from you?
Yep. Testing.
Excellent. And maybe my production assistant will chime in and let us know how we're doing, but I'm going to continue on. So as I mentioned, Oxesis, we founded this company with a bet, and that bet was that the future of work would include more people who are their own boss, who work on what they want, where they want, how they want, with who they want, you name it. Basically a bet for increased autonomy, agency, and maybe more responsibility at the individual level. And so, you know, as we were seeing things happen around us in the marketplace, what we found was a lot of folks involved with Oxesis had similar kind of hunches. And I think it was you, Chris, who mentioned that you thought you might see things going towards more of a cult of personality. We saw these things happening on Twitch, and we saw, you know, these things happening with content generation and maybe the influencer culture. And it definitely kind of resonated with me. I thought we'd see maybe a return back to kind of the way that things appeared to be in the 60s and 70s, especially from like an agency model perspective, where it was more personalities and individuals who people were interested in working with, as opposed to like, you know, big mastheads of firms. And so, yeah, we've got a masthead as a firm, but we work with a very distributed model. We work with lots of independent contractors. And our hope was to showcase some of those personalities on our live stream. So we launched a live stream, and I remember when we launched, Chris, you and I, we're throwing names around and trying to brainstorm and do a bit of creative planning for the show. And we liked the name Square One. It was something was there, and it kind of tied to our thesis or our bet. But at the same time, Square One typically means to take a project and scrap it, to throw it out entirely and start from scratch. And the show is about the future of work and leadership. And we thought there's many good things there in our traditional conceptions of work and leadership. And so Square One was close, but we flipped it a little bit and called the show Circle One, thinking maybe not everything just needs to be changed, perhaps just the shape. And so there we go. Circle One. Welcome everybody to the 11th episode of Circle One. We're joined today by two Auxesis independent contractors, and the topic of today's show is new media. So we are going to discuss Twitch and live streaming and all sorts of new media trends and things going on. We're new to Twitch ourselves, so it'll be exciting to have some folks who come from a creative perspective and are maybe just getting into using some of these new media channels and seeing lots of things happen in the wider marketplace. So, before we get into some of the topics, I'd like to turn things over to Chris and Brandon, as is tradition, for a little bit more of an introduction to them, to hear a little bit about their background, their experience, and the roles that they hold today. So maybe I'll turn it over to Chris first for a little intro to yourself and your background.
Sure. I am a creative person, mostly copywriter. Done some work in video and all of that kind of stuff. So I do, like to get my hands in a lot of media, and that's why I write, so I can, build nice media projects with good solid foundations. I really find it great that I get to work in an industry where we do have to be at the cusp of new media, and whenever something new comes out, we have to try it. We have to give it a chance and see what we can do with it and stuff like that. So that's always really fun, and we have no shortage of that right now. So it'll be a really interesting perspective from you guys on this chat too.
Excellent. All right, I'll turn it over to Brandon. Maybe a bit of background, an introduction to your day-to-day from Brandon.
Awesome. Yeah. Just like Chris, I'm a creative person as well. But I fit more on the design side of things. I am currently a student studying marketing in the Asper School of Business, and I think I could provide some value to this conversation through a bit of a student lens. I feel like in marketing, we talk a lot about new media and new ways to market. And I feel like some of my discussions that have happened in class can be applied to this live stream. And for my day-to-day, I engage in freelance branding work, and I've engaged on various projects with Auxesis. Each one has been awesome, and I've also done a few projects independently as well.
Excellent. All right, so we are kind of in new territory here. The show, Circle One, The Future of Work and Leadership, had a nice run on YouTube. We did 10 episodes. We developed a bit of a viewership, although rather small, and it was really fun to just slowly get the lay of the land of this live streaming world and try to infuse a bit of production value into our episodes and our show. And maybe a bit of background on myself. I ran a video production company for about a decade. We did action sports primarily on the West Coast. Snowboarding was our focus, and we had a hoot. And so I'd been away from the production world a little bit. And just kind of before the pandemic hit, we started to do our first corporate video production projects as Auxesis. And so I was kind of a little bit upset that was kind of yanked away from us so quickly. And so I was chomping at the bit to not only get back into video production, but to also, make a foray into something new, something challenging, excited to get out of my comfort zone. And frankly, I found that in live streaming. Every episode, 10 episodes so far, I mentioned to these guys before we went live, like my heart is in my throat every time 5 minutes before you press that go live button. So I commend anybody who's kind of really taken the ball and run with it in the live streaming world. And so, we did 10 episodes on YouTube, and now we find ourselves on Twitch. And already I've got to say, a platform that is built for live streaming, the thing that you're trying to do, just kind of makes sense. The kind of pre-live process that I just experienced already was fantastic. So don't get us wrong, I love YouTube. and we'll still have a home on YouTube. We'll publish every episode of Circle One, barring technical difficulties, on YouTube for later consumption. But Twitch is our new live streaming home for now, so very excited. But to get into some topic stuff, we are really interested in getting into talking about new media. So maybe I'll turn it over to Chris just to lay out kind of some of the things that he's seen happening in the world of new media. And obviously we're discussing live streaming a little bit, but I think we're also trying to identify some other trends in new media and new ways of delivering content. And I know that Chris had a few interesting things to say off the top of the show. So Chris, what are your thoughts? New media, what's going on?
Sorry, guys, I'm having a little technical difficulties on my end. I don't know if you were asking myself or Brandon, but
yeah, I was asking you. We were talking about new media. You mentioned you'd seen some trends, and we're really curious. I'm curious as to what your thoughts on new media,
okay.
What you see going on, and
Perfect.
what you think's working.
I missed all of that.
That's fine.
I missed all that.
That's fine.
Okay. My internet connection is spotty today, so just a heads up. But it seems to reboot back in the meeting really quickly. So, we were just talking before the show. I saw, this. I mean, when we talk about Circle One, we don't want to get too deep into the, COVID pandemic situation. But I want to talk about one really in particular that came out of this. And I know we've talked previously on the show about sort of, resonance and uncanny valley type stuff. When we're talking about streaming and new media, a lot of it tends to feel very raw. You've got TikTok, you've got all that kind of stuff. And watching, a lot of the agencies and creative houses that I follow on social and all that kind of stuff. It was really interesting at the beginning of this whole situation in March when, or at least in Canada in March, when you used to see you got to watch them go through a huge learning curve on the design end. There was obviously a learning curve that you saw from like a PR and brand, CSR statements and all of that kind of stuff. But there was a huge shift in design because all of a sudden you had all these photographers and videographers who could not go out and shoot original content. You had all these studios that you couldn't book for shoots. Like basically you couldn't create original non-illustrated or designed content, right? So that puts a huge number of your tools out of your toolbox. And what ended up happening is you watch these designers create this entirely new style of design that I think we're going to look back on this time and really see it as a big influence in the shift to truly like digital design. And also opened, I think, a lot of people's eyes to, I don't need to have all of these things to be able to create really good design and really good branding and really good content. So what ended up happening is you started to see a big mix of like collage and composite work, a lot of 3D rendering, even in really raw formats, a lot of found footage and like, what is it? Not open source.
Stock footage.
Creative Commons.
Creative Commons.
Like, Creative Commons type stuff. And it was just really interesting to see how these people were putting it together. And there was definitely some, I don't know if it was like class separation or geographic separation if you look at like groups of agencies, but there was definitely like some groups that found themselves doing this very similar version of this style, and some groups that like, some leaned way more heavily on like Cinema 4D and rendered design, and some went just fully to like paper cutout styles. It was great. It was really, really cool to see. So, I think we're starting to as consumers lower our bar for what we deem good design and good production, and there are a lot of things that say that maybe now we're starting to value other things other than just being pretty, right? Which is great. It's great for people like me. It's great for people like you, Brandon, and even yourself, John. It's I think there's a lot of value system readjusting going on in the world right now, and I think that this is a good one.
Absolutely. So a couple of things there to tie on, maybe in discussion or to pull on. I've loved, I think, the diversity that you mentioned in terms of like the creative style. Like we've just kind of seen the lid blown off, and it's just like, man, are people ever experimenting? It seems to me like maybe, and maybe Brandon and Chris, you can tell me if this makes sense to you. It seems like there are kind of like two major drivers of the style explosion, and the one is time. It's like, man, a lot of us have been home for the past 3 months, and it's like, me personally, I've had a little bit of extra time to like hone my skills and ability in certain areas. So 3D, for example, I've been trying to develop my Blender skills and 3D stuff. Like I'm working on it. And so I imagine like real, true creative professionals, like maybe they've had extra time to really hone their craft. And then on the other hand, on things, it's been maybe some market motivational force to really take things to market very quickly and to stay relevant and to stay to keep communicating with the marketplace and just with people and to stay connected. So it's like there's like these two strange driving forces out there that are motivating how creative style is expanding. So thoughts like, yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Of stuff, and it's like I think that was because I had just so much time to stare at the things I needed to stare at, you know.
Yeah, we just received word we had a little bit of audio trouble. You want to maybe summarize what you were saying
Oh,
about your website
I
work?
think the research thing definitely helps. You have just a lot more time to examine and to think and to let those things sink in and process that. Yeah, when you do have that time crunch on the other end, because no brand was able to stay silent through this, right?
Yeah.
Um, then yeah, I think it's just a perfect storm. And I think this is going to be one of those. I mean, it's going to be. I think it's like an art movement. We're going to look back on this and be like, this is a big shift and push. Because to be honest, some design in the last like, late 2010s has been very, there's always people pushing, but some of it has been very sane, you know.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, something else that we were talking about. So, Chris, I think you draw to attention towards maybe those styles that are quicker to actually go from production to publishing. Um, and then maybe we're seeing other stuff that is more refined work. And tying into the theme of new media, we saw something very interesting yesterday from the Adobe camp. Hats off to Adobe for putting together 99U, which was an all-day live streaming video conference for creators. And Chris and I spoke yesterday quite a bit about it. I think myself, we're working on our brand at Oxesis, and really our focus is being able to iterate and stay cohesive and systematic with our brand elements, our creative brand elements. And so we've chosen like a more illustrative style that's like a kind of easy to like mix and match and create new elements for. And then on the Adobe side of things, we saw showcased on their landing page. I can't remember the artist's name, but it was very, very finely detailed illustrative work that maybe even looked like paper and pen. I'm not sure how it was created, if it was digital or not, but it like harkened back to like the biological diagrams from the 1600s and stuff, and they did a really fun play on the different types of creators. And so they had the career focused creator that was like an illustrated tortoise that you'd find in like an encyclopedia from like 1700 or something, and a dragonfly with like 18 wings, and that was like the multitasker creative and all sorts of stuff. So I guess, Brandon, have you seen in your like media perusings examples from both sides of the spectrum, like that really, really refined, obviously like highly specialized creative output, and then maybe like the low poly or quick kind of timeline development type stuff?
Yeah, for sure I have. And just to go more on like the low poly timeline type stuff, one brand that really sticks out to me is Mailchimp.
Mm.
And I don't know if you're familiar with their campaign in branding, but they took almost a complete contrarian approach at the time when they did release their new brand. And I feel a few years ago everything was for sure a little bit more refined, and Mailchimp said, hey, we don't need to be the most refined thing on the planet. Let's get weird, let's get really creative, and let's make something new. And so I think Mailchimp is a perfect example of a brand that really, went almost on the extreme of using loose brand elements, and Mailchimp almost uses these sweepy lines, and and almost like it almost looks like they use like a graphite pencil in a lot of their designs.
Yeah.
And so that's almost completely on the low poly side of things. But then on the more refined and high like more refined side of things, I think we're starting to see less and less businesses do that, because I think that they're starting to realize the value of time, and it takes a lot more time and energy to create something that is beautiful. Although I do love to look at it, I think it's starting to get to the point where it's quite costly, and for the most part, people are content with something that is maybe a little bit less refined.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen with those, and I think the way that it's possibly going with brands is that if you ever want to do something like that as a brand, it's usually going to be a collaboration with an artist, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how they position those 99U illustrations, which you can buy a poster. We were talking about, I want to buy one of those posters.
Absolutely.
But I've seen Apple did a really good one a long time ago. I hate talking about Apple, but they did a really good one in their Apple stores, and they had these giant illustrated murals, and they did a little bit of thematic sort of tie-ins on their website, but they just like hired a really sweet artist and let her do her thing. And I think that's really awesome too, when a brand can just be like, we like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you do that, no matter, because then it's like, it doesn't matter if it's ugly or it's them,
Yeah. Well, we talked about this on another episode, how the snowboard and skateboard industries really have an interesting approach and a great way of remaining genuine with their core audience, and that is they support professional snowboarders and skateboarders. And at the end of the day, I was a snowboarder. I was an enthusiast, like a highly focused and involved enthusiast, and involved in the industry from the production side. And to me, like, a brand was not relevant if they didn't have a pro team and they didn't support the careers of 8 individuals on the global team, and then like go into every country and have like a national team, and then a semi pro national team, and an amateur team that they just gave free goods to, and that type of stuff. I'm seeing a lot of what you're mentioning, Chris, that sounds to me like one-off stuff. Have either of you seen trends from the design world, and maybe even the Twitch community might be a bit more in tune with this, of like a brand that supports a group of creators as like their team?
I mean, you get that with influencers for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can't think of any really.
I feel like that's tough. I feel like in almost an odd, twisted way, like Behance almost does that. Like, I know their job is to support creators, but you're trying to think of an example of a brand that just goes out and supports creators. Eh?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll mention. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No,
one of the Twitch streamers on the episode last time made me think of that, and she made an announcement that some brand that was kind of in line with her aesthetic, which was maybe a little bit like dark and brooding, and I don't want to call it metal or emo or punk or anything, but it was kind of like along those lines. She said, this brand has approached me as one of their artist contributors, and it called to mind like visions of like, sounds like this brand has like a whole bunch of creatives that like stare something stylistically in common with the brand that they turn around and support.
Everything I can think of is with sports.
Yeah.
But that's interesting, because I wonder if they call that like a sponsored creator or whatever. But I mean, now that line is so blurred. Like, even if you look at sports, any sport that doesn't have a league, right? If you look at those types of sports, what is the difference between a sponsored athlete and an influencer nowadays? Like, it doesn't exist anymore, right? So I wonder.
Brandon?
Yeah, I feel like that comes up quite frequently. Well, you gave the example of music, but also in fashion. I feel like fashion has just turned itself
Like
completely on
Rihanna.
its head. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say fashion for sure would fit into what you're saying.
Actually, I have a quick clip about Rihanna. If you guys want to watch something awesome in new media, like the Fendi fashion show that Rihanna put on, it's on Amazon. It's insane, the production value of this show.
Yeah.
And this was
Yeah.
a really big deal for new media thing. It was like in person, like concert event that was a fashion show in an arena, and then they put it on Amazon, and it was one of the most successful things on their platform. And
Huh.
it's like a marvel of production value.
You mentioned this on another episode. I have to check this out. It's something that sounds really cool. I'm not like a Rihanna fan or a fashion guru or anything, but that you every time you describe it, I'm like, oh, geez,
Neither am I.
I
But
gotta check
it's
that out.
amazing.
Yeah. Huh. And I got thinking about this and looking at the kind of the creative landscape and maybe the team players or the athletes in the creative landscape. There maybe isn't a third kind of motivator that I didn't mention when I mentioned those other two: time for focus and craft development, and then also I guess I'll call it constant readjustment of priorities in business and communications, right? Like just rapid readjustment. I think the other one is tools. It's like, and I think Chris, you mentioned this in the notes for the call today, or maybe it was you, Brandon, that oftentimes folks are leaning towards pursuing projects or brand identity projects that you're capable of developing content for completely on your phone or mobile device. Yesterday on Behance, we saw a lot of creators who did walkthroughs of just how they do digital illustrations on their tablets, and I guess it's just like the tools out there, and I'm not even talking about like the technology. I just mean like the sheer number, the multitude of tools that we have at our disposal for creativity. Like no longer is it just pen, paintbrush, paper, and all those tools. We're even seeing innovation in that space, but also throw in all the digital stuff, and it's like every day there's some new way to produce creative material and art. So, are you guys
Yeah,
playing?
I was just gonna completely tag on to that because I use Photoshop and Illustrator quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I do use also a tablet for a lot of my work, but I find that I've been traditionally, a mouse user opposed to an Illustrator. But I found a feature the other day with my tablet where I could use Photoshop and Illustrator with my tablet, and it's just opened up a completely new world of content for me. I'm finding I'm able, like the limitations that I was experiencing with my mouse and keyboard is now completely gone with the tablet.
Huh. Can you tell us technically, maybe because I'm curious, how are you using Photoshop and Illustrator on the iPad? You're an iPad user, right?
Yeah, I am. So it's a little bit geeky, but I was trying to mask and crop out a certain person out of a frame, and I was trying to use this thing called the pen tool in Photoshop, where I essentially draw all the way around the person or object, and it was just incredibly hard. And then I plugged in my iPad, and I found that with my pen, it took a matter of seconds to draw over the person, and I was actually able to get a much more accurate result. Yeah, just to plug the program I use this thing called Duet, and it helps pair my computer screen with my tablet screen.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha. And then it takes the input as well.
Yes.
How's the latency on Duet?
On it, I've read reviews, and it seems like other people have had bad experiences, but I vouch for it. I think it's phenomenal. I had no issues. Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, on the mouse side of things, I think both of you guys know I'm a bit of an ergonomics freak, and to me the mouse is a bit of an ergonomics nightmare, and also a productivity nightmare. To keep moving your right hand from the keyboard to the mouse is just like, my brain just goes, throughput time, efficiency bottleneck, right? So to learn all the hotkeys and try and stay on the keyboard as much as possible is so helpful. But then there's certain functions that you just can't do that. Like, and you know, Adobe Suite stuff is a perfect example. I might be able to produce a whole video without touching my mouse in post-production in Premiere, but you know, I cannot develop a new logo in After Effects without touching my mouse. Like I just have to touch my mouse, and to me, it's like this just is
It's way easier.
way more natural.
The tablet makes so much
Yeah.
more sense, and I think it's also like I'm seeing this a little bit on social, like just with like following like straight up artists and designers and stuff like that. Like when they're doing personal projects, almost all of them are using tablets now. Like all the
Yeah.
designers that I work with, when they do personal stuff, just like fun illustrations and whatever, they're all using tablets. And I think it's maybe gonna evolve backwards, right? Like illustration is really making a comeback. I think like true unique illustration, not just the like we had a lot of years of the flat stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think that some of the more really like expressive illustration is coming back and in a big way. And I think that's because of the tablets. Like I think that you're right in saying those 99U illustrations were digitally done. And yeah, I mean, I hope we can see more of that stuff because purposeful, like purpose-built content rather than like plug and play tools is always better.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the input and the tools, it's I've definitely noticed the same thing in terms of the tablets that you mentioned, Chris. And I tried for the longest time to do this, and what I did is I got these. Oh, geez. Whoa! I got tons of these stands, and what I would do is I had a Surface Book that was like that tablet flip over, and I would have my monitors in front of me, but then I would have the tablet open on the stand in front of me, and so often I would just take out a pen and sketch notes in Microsoft OneNote, and I often use the pen in Illustrator and stuff. But what I've struggled to find, and there's a couple companies that do this, is a great high-end creator's monitor that isn't a standalone device. Like so, Wacom has the Cintiq, and it's $2,000 for the high-end model and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping for more like mainstream consumer stuff that is a touch screen and pen input that has a high response rate, high input resolution that you can fold and put in front of you. I think the Microsoft Surface.
The Surface.
What's
the
that
desktop one?
Yeah, I can't remember what that one's called. Very cool looking device, but I want my own kind of open source third party hardware like that I can plug into my own system and configure on my own. And I know Dell has done one, and a few others have done one, but I just haven't seen that pushed enough, and I'm hopeful. Do you think that with the way that things are going, we might see a bit more of that new, unique kind of PC tablet hybrid stuff?
Yeah, I really think so. I think that the competitive landscape is quite interesting at the moment because right now you either have a laptop that wants to be a tablet, or a tablet that wants to be a laptop, and I don't think we've fully seen the line blur yet. And I love what you're talking about, having something that you can physically take off and put down that's very fast and you can configure properly. That'd be awesome. But I don't think that there's anything there yet, but I think there will be.
Well, those tools all change the mode of like creating, right? Like John, you're a big journal guy. I'm also a big journal guy. I don't know if you are, Brandon, but there's something I noticed that I had to get back into. I used to be a big pen and paper guy, not journaling, and then I noticed a huge decline in my work actually over the course of a year, where I was like, what is going on? I just wasn't being as creative, and I realized that it was because I was not using pen and paper at all.
Yeah.
And I think that when it comes to like you're saying with the mouse thing and all of that stuff, when it comes to sitting down at like something as daunting already as like Photoshop or After Effects, creativity just like somehow is so much harder to push through, and like there's so many roadblocks in the way, and something like a tablet I do believe it just like it alleviates so much friction in that process. And I think for designers especially, it's letting them have something as simple as like, I mean, I'm not a person that uses a typewriter, but something as simple as a typewriter for a writer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not much going on, very limited tool set, extension. Just natural extension. Yeah. And it's tactile, and that I think that's huge, and I think that's also part of the reason that even like the little Instagram bite-size raw content and video and all that, like Instagram stories and all that stuff on social we're seeing is cool too, because something about the touch just makes it so much more, it feels like you're creating versus when I'm in Illustrator or in some of those programs, it feels like I'm building, and
Yeah.
those are two different things, right?
Yeah, it definitely feels more sterile in the in those other tools. Brandon?
Yeah, I was just gonna add on actually, because I feel like creativity is a collection of ideas, and you want to get down those ideas as fast as you can. And logging on to some programs like Photoshop and Illustrator is, yeah, I agree, it's daunting and it's very tough to get your idea down as fast as possible, which means that your creative output is worse. So I think with any new project, I think it's always best to put pencil to paper, but I love this whole movement of putting like tablet pencil to tablet, get that creative output down, have something that's raw and unfinished, and then use Illustrator and Photoshop to tweak the design. But I think creativity for sure has to just be.
And people are sharing it right away. Like there's also a lot less, I don't know, shame. It's not shame, but maybe just embarrassment or whatever that they're feeling. There's a lot less barriers in that sense, I think. So people are sharing the stuff that they may not be happy about, because what it comes down to nowadays is frequency.
Yeah. Honestly.
Well, I gotta say,
that comes back to your time thing, John.
Yeah. What I gotta say is I'm super hopeful that we see that the tablet kind of edges pushed a little bit, and then I'm also super hopeful that we see like the office productivity software suites grow. So OneNote's done a decent job. I'm still waiting to see the Google side of things do a decent job. But where I found value in kind of like the low fidelity, quick and dirty, back a napkin sketch, journal type stuff, that visceral creative stuff, is with our client engagements at the earliest stages of any development. Very often I find that a client is tempted to like open up Word or Docs or slides or whatever, and like map out like kind of what they have in their head for how they want their product to look or their brand elements or whatever. And I always tell folks, even folks that we work with on the team who maybe have more skill in those areas, is like at those phases where you're still kind of brainstorming and just trying to get some options out on the board, it's just like, I often just tell people, just grab a pen and a paper and just sketch out wireframes, just draw stuff. I think Draplin Design Co. In Oregon does a fantastic job of this. And this guy just is so gung-ho on the notes and the low fidelity brainstorm early stage of development side of things. So I'm hoping that there's a way to connect digitally, improve that connection for digital collaboration stuff. And I think for agencies and new media production houses and stuff, the ability to remotely share that visceral, low fidelity production stuff, if that improves, I think what that means is that final products start improving, whether that means that they're like more refined or like more in tune with brands or whatever vector you're chasing. I'm very hopeful to see like the next 5 years of interface and interface and software. So super excited about that.
To your point there, when your clients want to come and just start going into that direction right away, I mean, I think we're in a stage where we have a problem in at least the creative industry where everything has to be a deck and everything has to, and it's, there's nothing wrong with having a napkin idea. That's where some of the best ones come from. Like, I don't need a deck to tell you 3 sentences, it's unnecessary. Yeah. And that's where I think, you get that level of polish, but there's no substance. So somehow those, like, that piece of content in the end just doesn't hit as well as if sometimes you would present it as, I wrote this last night.
Yeah. It's like, here's 4 big words in my notebook. Like, look at this, right? Fascinating stuff. We're talking a lot about creative production, and I think that folds into new media quite a bit. But I wonder if we might get a bit more specific in talking about new media channels. We are obviously talking a bit about Twitch and Instagram and some of those platforms. But I want to get even more specific and call out and give some major kudos to some people who are in our closer professional network here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Obviously, we're maybe a little bit of an insulated world in more ways than one. But in our fascinating kind of environment in Winnipeg, we're seeing some awesome stuff. And so I want to call out and give some props to a buddy of mine, Luke Bohonaki. As the pandemic kind of really struck us all, he decided something very similar, and he was going to strike out on YouTube. He founded a channel called The First Customer Club, and he interviews longer form entrepreneurs and startup founders in all different types. And then I'd also like to call attention to another friend of mine, Grant White. His wealth management firm has launched a live stream platform, a live stream show themselves. They look like they're doing a fantastic job. Rob Tetreault, who's another wealth management guy in Winnipeg, he's doing live streaming, and this looks pretty new. He's always been doing lots of media, but he's really killing it. Who else? There's one other Winnipeg one who really has caught my attention recently. I can't remember, but I guess the point is, Brandon, Chris, have you guys seen some forays into new media from maybe like our closer network here in Winnipeg that have caught your attention?
Yeah. Oh, I think Chris jumped out.
Okay.
So
we'll get him back.
I'll jump in real quick.
Here he is.
He's back. Awesome. Yeah. So I definitely do think that there's tons of new media coming out of Winnipeg, and it's awesome to see. I think just in general, the whole media landscape is changing, and it's changing so fast. And with that in mind, I think we can look at history to predict what's going to happen and coming forward and in the future. And I think for the most part, for example, when something like YouTube came out and it was a new media, it was for cat videos. Corporations, big businesses weren't using YouTube, and it was looked at as a joke. And the first videos that did come out of YouTube, they were new and they were awkward and they were unpolished, but still the content creators were getting at something. And I think almost like a great new media that's come out of the Winnipeg space as I've started to see more comedy shows, shows and comedy live streams come out of Winnipeg. And at first, it almost seemed difficult for comedians to speak directly to a camera because they didn't have that audience and they didn't have that laugh track and the laughter coming from the audience. But I really am hopeful for the future, and I think moving forward, as comedians get more comfortable maybe talking to equipment and live streams, it'll almost become a norm, and a whole new beast will come out of it entirely.
Awesome, absolutely.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, Brandon. I mean, we might as well give him a shout out. Julian Rowan. I don't know, but he's funny, local Winnipeg comedian. I found watching those videos that he was just really able to harness the awkwardness of the situation and use that to elevate his comedy. Like, he was so self-aware. Part of it, I think, was because he was in a mirror, but he was so self-aware of the fact that he was by himself and like waiting for the laugh, but no laugh coming was hilarious.
Yeah.
And having done
how did I
did my toes in
find
stand-up
my
way back
last
when, and that was
first customer?
That's hard. So props to him.
Can we get a link to throw in the chat for the viewers? We've got a small viewership here today, but
on Twitter and Instagram, Julian Rowan.
Maybe I can pull something.
Julian Rowan.
ROWAN.
Jules Rowan.
I think so.
Asper isn't just a school. Okay, this looks like it might be.
Oh yeah,
him.
a lot of Winnipeg memes. It's
nice.
Lots
All right.
of Winnipeg memes.
I just threw Luke Bohoniki's YouTube channel, The First Customer Club, in the chat for anybody who's in the chat and wants to check that out. It's fantastic. And then just threw Julian Rowan's Twitter in the chat. I'll be checking that one out after. I haven't seen that. You misspelled Creecom. Awesome. And it looks like in the Twitter some Winnipeg friends. So I'll have to check this out. That's awesome. There's one other one that I just remembered, the one I was mentioning, and that was InVision Edge. John Ferris and some of the guys over there. Man, they have been obviously offering a lot of fantastic seminars for their innovation training. Those look awesome. I haven't yet joined one, but the products and services that they've started to deliver online through new media channels look phenomenal. And then in their kind of foray into more public media distribution, John Ferris at InVision Edge just launched a really interesting series. I just watched the first episode, I think, the other day, and it's 1 leader, one question, 1 minute. And so obviously at Circle One, we've been pursuing like a longer form conversation and trying to get into things. And I think what I found is, yeah, it's sometimes people have the bandwidth at lunch hour, they don't, and over at the Vision Edge side of things, it looks like they're really having some traction with the 1 minute, one CEO, one question kind of thing. And like, man, I've tuned in and watched the whole thing, and it was fascinating. The first guy on the episode, and I can't remember his name, he his answer included strategic procrastination. And so he talked about like confronting a problem and then going off to play baseball or whatever and having those ideas and potential solutions percolate, and then how that refreshes your approach when you re-enter the problem solving kind of mindset. So that was fascinating and a really cool kind of approach. Chris, I know you mentioned there's one in particular, and I'll throw in Vision Edge in the chat for anybody who wants to check it out, but there's one in particular that really influenced us when we were starting Circle One, and I think that was the Sparks and Honey live stream. And so maybe can you tell us a little bit about Sparks and Honey and what they've been up to? And I think you might be, having a little connection issue, so I'll do my best to describe it as Chris gets back here. But Sparks and Honey, I think, is out of New York, and they describe themselves as a cultural agency, I think. And what they do is every, I think 2 or 3 times a week, they do a cultural briefing, and they do it from a studio, or they did it from a studio before the pandemic in New York, and they have a whole bunch of correspondents gather, and they each have their topics and areas of inquiry and news that they've gone about. And then they also have developed a proprietary kind of cultural pulse metric or intro graphic. And so they sit down, they look at all these trends that they've derived quantitative support for and analyze, and they throw it up on a board. Then they have a bunch of correspondents speak maybe more specifically and viscerally about some of these trends and stuff. And I think that's kind of where my ability to explain it, runs out of road. And maybe Chris, you can tell us a little bit more about Sparks and Honey. As I'll look for a link to throw in the chat to these guys. But
so yeah, they started as a effectively a communications ad media agency, and they started to progress into the world of, I guess really what it was AI social listening.
mm-hmm.
And then they ended up getting some really interesting consulting contracts with DARPA, and really to do a lot of like innovative research on large scale human behavior. And what they do is they do something like signals and something else, not noises, one of them, but basically what they do with these culture briefings is they have this system, I think it's called Q, yeah, and it scrubs and does a bunch of social listening. It looks at everything from like patent applications to social media conversations, and it just scrubs a bunch of databases for what it picks up as signals. And then it will identify sort of these macro trends within the sphere of digital content that exists. And that will build the conversation topics for the briefings. They bring in experts on the briefings, and then those conversations get fed back into their software to even further pinpoint and use that to, I guess, filter more detailed signal from detailed noise, I think.
Yes, that sounds very, very accurate. And I'm just looking at
it's wild.
Sorry, I was in the wrong screen here, but back to the discussion view. I was just looking at their website, and it looks like for the first time ever, this is a new thing, they're making Q available to the public, I guess, as a product. So it's a new landing page on their website, Q by Sparks and Honey. Sign up for a demo. You can be a user, and I guess incorporate some of that core technology that Sparks and Honey is using to identify trends and macro movement and stuff like that.
And there are a few services like this. I mean, like at my work, we use Trend Hunter, and I find it's the thing that I find interesting about Q is that, or at Sparks and Honey, is that they really like give it a purpose. A lot of these trend spotting, whether they're algorithms or just farms of people doing research, they tend to just be a lot of noise.
Yeah.
So these ones, they are looking like 2 to 3 year with Sparks and Honey, 2 to 3 year long-term trends that are going to be like, they pretty well predicted SpaceX.
Yeah. So I think Sparks and Honey, if you
yeah.
look at their marketing material, they say
Yeah.
right now they're big on space, so they're bullish on space. They think this is a huge
And they
trend.
have been for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I can't see that stopping. I think if they're definitely right. It appears to be that to me. And then funny that this is the new media episode, the first episode of Twitch, or the first episode of Circle One on Twitch, and we're talking about Sparks and Honey. I'm pretty sure that Sparks and Honey was one of those kind of early adopters or identifiers of the live streaming trend. And I think they identified it and were singing it from the mountaintops as being bullish on live streaming, like kind of a couple of years or 3 years before Twitch really just absolutely blew up. And so I think all the people that they had brought around to that way of thinking really benefited from it. And I think they were getting a lot of their clients and brands that they were advising onto and prepared for this new live stream kind of conversation, which I can only imagine. I think, Brandon, that you talked about YouTube and cat videos. You know, if you would have told, you know, a brand executive, you know, 10 years ago that the cat channel media platform would be where all their, you know, corporate video content would live in the future, they'd probably roll their eyes and laugh at you. And I wonder if the same is true of Twitch. And I think a lot of brand executives right now probably look at Twitch through the lens of its niche, which is video games and esports. But I wouldn't be surprised if, just like cat videos, all of a sudden, you know, fostering a home for corporate communications, if Twitch really kind of grows into more of a home for larger scale brand conversation or larger scale you know, market conversation. Obviously, probably always paying homage to video game roots. I don't know, maybe I'm out to lunch here, but you know, I think YouTube kind of does that. I think YouTube, in terms of their brand and communications, kind of plays homage to the fun, you know, cat meme, cat video, you know, dad pranks, or, you know, silly family video stuff that it posted or people posted on it in its first days. So what do you guys think? What do we know about Twitch? I gotta say, I don't know a lot about Twitch, and I think that we're probably gonna learn as we go. But thoughts? Esports, Twitch, what do you guys know? What's going on?
I mean, I have done one ad for Twitch. That's it. As far as an ad platform, pretty well the same. We did choose to go a little rawer look just to match it, but that was our first crack at it. It was nothing special, but I don't think we really knew what was going on. So really, that's all I can say.
Were you able to monitor? Were you able to monitor performance or engagement on it, or do you remember?
I wasn't personally. If I recall, it was just sort of like meh. You know, it wasn't bad. Nothing crazy. I think that they were surprised, though. We did get a lot more traction with Twitch than we did at the time with Snapchat. However, we did really proceed to figure out Snapchat and fix that problem. And we haven't done Twitch since.
Yes.
We'll see.
Brandon?
Really excited to explore it.
Yes. Yeah.
I was actually just going to take a shot at YouTube. You said, what are your thoughts on Twitch? I said, well, it seems to be better than YouTube. So. No, but honestly, I don't really know where Twitch is going to go. I feel like that there's a plethora of different streaming services that you can go to at the moment, such as even like Instagram streaming. And what I'm wondering is if there's going to be other social media platforms that start to adopt this, like maybe even like TikTok streaming. But what I do find interesting about streaming from the corporate perspective, to go back to the whole YouTube cat idea, is that I think a lot of businesses were really hesitant about using certain platforms because they were really trying to be careful what they put out, and they didn't want to hurt or offend or communicate a wrong message. And so they were very weary. Now, what's interesting about streaming and using streaming platforms for different businesses is that it's immediate. When you say it, it's out there. You can no longer take it back. And so it's
inherently messy.
I know, right? And so I do think Twitch and Instagram Live are going to play a role within businesses, but I think it's going to take some time for for that to really come to fruition.
Absolutely. I gotta say, like on the client side of things, like it even just considering social media, like some posts that you can spend a week curating and polishing, like even that is
Yeah.
anxiety inducing for a brand who really wants to be very careful with their brand and their communications, and rightfully so. So I think the live streaming stuff is like this double-edged sword. It represents this whole new, kind of ball of wax, can of worms, whatever you want to call it, of just unknowns in terms of risk and the way that your voice can be taken, interpreted, reconstrued, and all the rest of it.
I think that brands can work through that in a really interesting way. I mean, like for myself, I work a lot on, standard social stuff, writing captions again that can go through rounds of edits and stuff like that. It's sometimes way easier to just open up my phone and write it and right there.
Yeah.
Oh, did I lose you guys?
You're a little stuttery. But not too bad. I think you might be reestablishing a connection here. So maybe I'll pull on another thread that came to mind. We were shouting out some Winnipeg content creators and like new media forays and some leaders in the space. And there's one in particular Brandon mentioned, Snapchat, I think, and obviously that's an amazing world of new media. This whole Snapchat thing. That's like, I don't even know. Does that even have a word like for the type of media channel that Snapchat is? Like Twitch is live streaming, Instagram live is live streaming, YouTube live. There's traditional video content. There's social media feed posts and stuff like that. It's like, what is Snapchat?
I think they call it like momentary video or something, like because it's gone. Like
yeah. That's so interesting. But anyways, the shout out belongs to Chris Schmidt and the Every Studio team, who founded a company called GeoFilter Studio. I'm gonna throw a link in the chat to their website, Every Studio. They are based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, the world's largest producer of Snapchat filters, which, wow, just completely took off. And I think what you can do is log on to the GeoFilter Studio website, and if you are either having a party or hosting a wedding, or you're a brand wanting to have branded, curated Snapchat filters, so basically branded stuff over your Snapchat broadcast, you go to GeoFilter Studio and engage with them, and they'll make you kind of whatever filter you want. I think is the proposition there. Maybe I'm misstating, but seems like they are really, really killing it. So hats off to them for being involved with this foray into new media. Any other players, any other brands that you think are doing a good job, or should we? What do you think, guys? I know Chris, you said you had a hard stop here at 1. Should we?
Yeah, I do, and my internet connection is terrible. I apologize.
Well, hey, why don't we then transition into a bit of a wrap up? And as is customary on Circle One, something we like to do is wind things down with a bit more of a human approach. And so, maybe I'll turn it to Brandon and say, Brandon, who are you outside of discussion of new media and business and work and leadership? What do you like to do on the weekend? What do you do for fun? Hey, what are you doing this weekend? What's going on?
Oh yeah, awesome. Well, I think I'm a fairly difficult person, not to hype myself up, but
Oh, sure,
I
buddy.
consider myself to be one of Winnipeg's hipsters. During my week, I'm usually
Proud Winnipeg hipster.
Honestly, I find during the week, if I'm not at the office, I usually spend a lot of time biking. This week it was a bit of a challenge because the temperature just fluctuated like crazy. So I was biking through the rain like crazy. But rain, snow, or shine, I'll still always keep biking. And this weekend I'm gonna head out to a cabin with some friends and hopefully enjoy some sunshine and some time just connecting from new media.
Awesome. Yes, that's always a necessary component.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, how about you? What's going on, bro?
Oh man, I booked a tea time for Sunday.
Ooh.
I am becoming a golf nerd overnight, and I'm realizing it's just because I'm a product nerd, not because I like sports. So yeah, just trying to golf, and yeah, if the night weather's nice, gonna bike. I may be heading to Falcon Lake. I'm not sure. Might be go picking up a boat, but I don't know. Depends if it's ready.
Awesome. Awesome.
That's about it, man. What about you, John?
Oh,
What about you?
I think last weekend we went camping to a spot called Adam Lake in southern Manitoba, which was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Sorry, I hope I don't blow that spot up unnecessarily, but three viewers in the chat. Keep it quiet, guys. Locals only. But I think this weekend we're probably gonna take it easy around the house on Saturday, and then hopefully maybe do the rounds for Father's Day on Sunday. Very, very excited. I think the fathers out there really, I don't know about you guys, but my dad definitely is really deserving of a bit of extra attention. It's been tough, I think, for mums and dads through all of this. I know that they typically love to get a lot of family interaction. So hopefully get some fun Father's Day time with the family on Sunday and really recharge Sunday night and come back to the new week with fresh eyes and a lot of new energy. So yeah, I think that'll be it for us for this first episode, first Twitch episode of Circle One, which is technically episode 11. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate having you both join us today. I think Chris
Awesome,
is
thank you.
frozen. Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Chris is reconnecting here, but thanks so much for joining us, Chris. Really appreciate it, man.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Excellent.
Just
and
the
then,
time to say that.
Yeah, exactly. And then we'll turn it to the viewers at home. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us here on the first Twitch episode. Thanks for joining us if you've joined us in the past. We look forward. We're going to keep doing this every Friday at noon Central, with the goal being, 6 months in, let's see what happens. Let's see where we take it. So I think we got some great ideas on today's show. Some people that we'd maybe like to have some conversations with. We shouted out a bunch of Winnipeg folks who we're hoping to get on the show in the future, and then hopefully we're able to expand a little bit internationally. We've got some pretty interesting plans in terms of hopeful future panelists that we've been working out over the last 10 weeks. So very excited to continue to reach outside of our comfort zone and to grow the show and this new channel. And just once again, thank you all to the viewers at home, and of course thanks to all our frontline workers and everybody working so diligently to keep us safe and to keep the wheels rolling. I can't wait to be rolling beside everybody soon. So hats off, have a wonderful weekend, and take care.
Awesome. Take care.
Yeah.
I think